फ्रेंड्स, कैसे हो आप लोग? वेलकम बैक. माई सेल्फ पुष्पेंद्र सिंह and we are going to start with our today's daily current affairs. So today you have 29th of June 2021. As you know that these lectures are useful for those who are preparing for the civil services examination which is conducted by the UPSC as well as other government competitive examinations, right? And we are referring the two national newspapers, The Hindu and Indian Express. Okay, you can also read those two newspapers which are very important for this examination. Okay, and you can subscribe our channel on the YouTube for these lectures which are uploaded on the YouTube on the day-to-day basis, so that you can basically supplement your preparation with the help of these lectures. All right, so let's begin with the lecture. Okay, so first news is all about the project Seaworld. Okay, so here the defense minister Shri Rajasthan Singh have recently visited the Karwar naval base, which is basically located in Karnataka, right? So here the phase second infrastructural development work related to the Karwar naval base is currently undergoing. So to check the speed and the process, right, of this construction work or the infrastructure development work of this Karwar naval base, the defense minister have recently visited. Okay, the project Seaworld is basically associated with the naval infrastructural development project associated with this Karwar naval base, which is supposed to be the Asia's largest naval base once it is fully commissioned. But now the first phase have now been recently been commissioned for that purpose. Second phase is currently undergoing. Okay, and which involved basically the creation of the naval base at the Karwar in the west coast of India. Okay, and here the most important aspect is that the INS Kadamba, right, which is basically the Indian Navy base also located near Karwar. So once it is fully functional or fully infrastructure, right, it will be the India's largest naval base in that respect. Okay, so first phase of the construction of the base, which was codenamed as a Seaworld, it was already completed in 2005. Okay, the INS Kadamba that we are talking, right, is basically the currently the third largest naval base, right, and it is expected to become the largest naval base in the eastern hemisphere that we are talking. Okay, once it is fully completed after the phase second completion. Okay, now one thing that will be coming to your mind is why we need such type of base. As you remember that during the India-Pakistan war, right, in 1971, okay, the Indian Navy basically faced some sort of a security challenges, specifically in the Western Fleet in the Mumbai harbor, right, during that war, due to the some sort of a congestion in the shipping lanes from the commercial the shipping traffic as well as the fishing boats and tourists for that purpose also. Okay, and at the end of war also the various options was considered on addressing these concerns that were also related during the India-Pakistan war of 1971. So upon completion of this project, okay, it will provide the Indian Navy the largest naval base on the west coast, right. It will be also the largest naval base to the east of the Suez Canal to that respect. And the Indian Navy's the aircraft carrier that is also known as the INS Vikramaditya, okay, would also be based in at the Karwar naval base in Karnataka. So here the Indian Navy's lone this aircraft carrier would also be based in the Karwar naval base. So definitely it will become a strong house for the Indian Navy for that purpose. Okay, next, the DRDO Defense Research and Development Organization recently have successfully test fired the next generation, the nuclear capable ballistic Agni Prime missile. Okay, this is the new missile, or this is the next generation, the nuclear capable ballistic missile, okay, which is currently being named as Agni Prime. Okay, so it's advanced variations of the Agni class of missiles, right, or in the series of Agni class of missiles, the Agni P or Agni Prime is a advanced version. Okay, it is basically a canistered missile which can be shot from the canistered in the form of a ballistic, okay, which will have the capability of around 1000 to 2000 strike, right, the distance. So it can basically strike at the distance of 1000 to 2000 kilometers to that respect. So here you could see that many advanced technologies, including the advanced propulsion system, innovative guidance systems, right, the control mechanism, state of art navigation system have been put into the Agni Prime, okay, and it will basically strengthen the India's deterrence capability to that respect also, definitely. Okay, so it will be having some sort of advanced maneuvering capacity, right, as well as the highest level of the accuracy to that matter. So here you could see, right, various Agni class of missiles. So Agni class of missiles that we are talking, right, specifically basically is a mainstay of India's nuclear launch capacity, okay, which include also the Prithvi short range ballistic missiles, submarine ballistic missiles, as well as the fighter aircraft fired missiles. So here the longest one is basically Agni 5, which is intercontinental ballistic missile. So I just put it down here, the Agni 1, as it has been not clear in this figure. So Agni 1 will have the strike the capacity of around 700 kilometers. The Agni 2 will have the strike capacity of around 2000 plus kilometers. The Agni 3 will have the strike the capacity of around 3200 kilometers from the projected area, okay. Then Agni 4 sorry, will have around 3500 kilometers plus range, and Agni 5 can strike around 5000 plus kilometers. So it is basically the intercontinental ballistic missile. So it is what it is called, intercontinental. It can strike across the continent. So definitely India has operationalized various versions of the Agni class of missiles in that respect. Okay, next, the India to become the self-reliant in the phosphatic fertilizers, right. So until now what is happening is that India is dependent on the import on the various the fertilizers uses, specifically for the agriculture. So here the Department of Fertilizer, right, have basically made an action plan to make, right, India as a Atmanirbhar Bharat, specifically in the rock phosphate, which is basically a key component or key the raw materials, specifically in the DAP and NPK fertilizers. So what is that DAP? The DAP is basically the diammonium phosphate, okay. That is the one type of fertilizer, right, where the rock phosphate is basically a key raw material. The second is basically NPK, that is nitrogen, phosphatic and potassium, right. So that will have the NPK fertilizers with that respect, okay. So in order to make India as a Atmanirbhar Bharat, specifically in the rock phosphate, okay, an action plan was basically released by the Department of Fertilizers in that respect. Now let us understand about the phosphatic fertilizers. So phosphorus that we basically use as a raw material in the phosphatic fertilizer is basically as the 11th most abundant element that is being found on the earth, okay. And the commercial phosphatic fertilizers that we basically use in the field or in the agriculture are manufactured, right, using this phosphatic rock or the rock phosphate, okay. Approximately 2/3 of the world phosphatic resources have been derived from either the sedimentary rocks or sedimentary phosphatic rock deposits or the marine phosphatic rock deposit, which are basically found in the marine area, okay. Now here the most commonly that we basically use, the ground rock phosphate, right, have been a major source, right, for the phosphorus for the basically found in the soils, right. So but due to the low concentration of this phosphorus in this native material that we basically use, right, specifically in the rock phosphate, the high transportation cost is also involved, right. Small crop responses also be one of the factor, right, with the uses of the rock phosphate. So definitely which has reduced considerably in the agriculture for the purpose of that uses, right. But the uses of the phosphorus based fertilizers have grown significantly for that purpose, okay. Now the most prominent or most common the used phosphatic fertilizers are basically the diammonium phosphatic fertilizers, the monoammonium phosphatic fertilizers, the NPK, the nitrogen, potassium, and nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and SSP fertilizer. These are the most common phosphatic fertilizers that we basically use. And the phosphorus is basically one of the essential nutrients which are required for the plant growth also, right? That is what we put this phosphatic fertilizers in the agricultural feed. So definitely it help in the root development, the plant maturation, as well as the seed development. So it will basically help in the development of the crops. And the rock phosphate is basically one of the key raw materials for the DAP, that is diammonium phosphatic fertilizer, that we basically use, or NPK fertilizers. And the India is 90% dependent on the import for this rock phosphate. So you could understand that the high dependability of India, specifically on the import of this rock phosphate, is made, right, the Department of Fertilizer to make India as a self-reliant or Atmanirbhar Bharat, specifically for that rock phosphate. And for that purpose a roadmap have been implemented. So for that purpose, as you know, that this diammonium phosphate, right, is the most widely used phosphorus, which basically the phosphorus fertilizer that we are talking. Okay, it is popular due to it is having high nutrient content. Okay, and it is basically having the excellent physical capacity also, right? Capacity. So this DAP, or the diammonium phosphate, is basically an excellent source of the phosphorus as well as the nitrogen, both for the plants. Okay, so it provides some sort of a correct proportion of the phosphorus and the nitrogen, right, for the farming of grains. Like it will be useful for the wheat, okay, the wheat, barley, fruits, and vegetables. It is must for that. Okay, the second one, that is NPK fertilizers. The NPK fertilizers basically are also called the compound fertilizers. Why it is called compound fertilizer? Because it contains basically all three nutrients, that is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, that is K. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, all three nutrients are basically present in the different proportions. So that is what we call them. Now, why we need this phosphorus? First of all, why we are focusing on this phosphorus? If the soils are basically deficient in the phosphorus, the food production become some sort of a restrictive. Okay, so unless you add this phosphorus in the adequate form, the food production may not be adequate. Okay, so ultimately, in order to increase your productivity and the production, you need to add this phosphorus fertilizer, right, for that purpose. And along with the nitrogen and the potassium, the phosphorus is one of the most important element for the plant life, right? If the soil is getting depleted of the phosphorus, right, because of many reasons, right, the modern farming industry basically exactly need this phosphoric based fertilizer. Okay, now the volatility in terms of the international prices affected this domestic prices of this rock phosphate also, because as you know that India is 90% dependent. Okay, that basically hindered the progress in the development of agricultural sector also. So which forced basically government of India to provide the subsidy in the fertilizers to the basically farmers in that respect. Next, the Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Okay, so Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay was basically the most famous revolutionary, right? Recently the Prime Minister Narendra Modi have paid a homage to the Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay on his birth anniversary, right? So he was born in 1838 and he died in 1894. The Chattopadhyay, or Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, was basically a revolutionary novelist. He was also considered as a great poet and the journalist. Okay, as you know that he was basically composer of the Vande Mataram that we basically sing. Okay, that basically in the original, in the Sanskrit form, right, which basically personifying the mother goddess or Mother India. Okay, which inspired almost all freedom fighters, right, during Indian the freedom struggle for that purpose. And the Chattopadhyay also wrote the 14 nobles, okay, in his entire lifetime. And he wrote these nobles on the various the socio-economic some sort of a critical issues related to the basically your the British rule, right? And he is also known as the Sahitya Samrat. The Sahitya Samrat, that is the emperor of literature, specifically in the Bengali. So Sahitya Samrat is basically considered as the emperor of literature because he has considered or he has written almost 14 novel, which has also contributed to the Bengali literature development to that respect. Okay, the most famous novel that was written during the British time was basically Anand Math. Okay, so Anand Math was basically a political novel that depicts a sannyasi or the ascetic fighting the British force, right? This book basically, also, basically, inspired various freedom fighters for that purpose, right? And it's also helped in the rising of the Indian nationalism for that purpose. So this novel was also the source of the song of Vande Matram, right? Which is basically, set to music by Rabindranath Tagore, and which was taken by many Indian nationalists, right? And which is now considered as a national song of India, as you know, right? And this novel is basically, set on the Sannyasi rebellion that was basically happened during the British rule. So this Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay basically, imagine the sannyasi soldiers like him, okay, who fought the Britishers and defeated the highly experienced of British army in the sannyasi rebellion, and ultimately the British could not defeat back those, right? And this novel was, first appeared specifically in the serial form, and ultimately the Chattopadhyay was basically also founded one magazine in 1872 to publish all such, the issues on that perspective. The Vande Matram become the most prominent, the song during Swadeshi movement, which was also contributed by the Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay with that respect, right? And which also sparked, the Lord Curzon attempt to the basically, the partition of Bengal, which was held in 1905. And the most important aspect is that the drawing from the Shakti tradition of Bengal or Bengali Hindus, the Chattopadhyay basically personified the India as a mother goddess, which is also known as the Bharat Mata, right? Which gave the song as a Hindu undertone, and which ultimately, infuriated various Muslim leaders to that respect also. Okay. Next, the Sainath Award 2021, that is the FUKA Prize. So here the most important is that the noted journalist P. Sainath have recently been selected as one of the 3 recipients of the FUKA Prize for 2021. This FUKA Prize, right, or the FUKA Prize was basically given annually to the distinguished people, right, who fostered or who increased the awareness related to the Asian cultures, right, through either journalism or through either various means. So it created basically a broad framework of exchange and the mutual learning platform among the Asian people. So this FUKA Prize was basically established in 1990, right, by the city of Fukuoka in Japan. So that is what the prize name is, also named after the city. So it was established in 1990 by the city of Fukuoka in Japan, right? So this Fukuoka City International Foundation, right, which basically gave this prize to the distinguished people, right, who foster and increase the awareness of the Asian culture. So this grand prize was basically awarded to various people. Till now, the 11 Indians have been received this FUKA Prize. Okay, and total around 115 people have been received this prize from almost 28 countries in the past 30 years since its inception from 1990 onward. Okay, now regarding the citation of this award, right, the P. Sainath is basically considered or described a very deserving recipient of the grand prize of the FUKA. The secretariat of the FUKA Prize, giver basically noted the excellent work which was given or which was done by P. Sainath specifically for the rural India and for the promotion of the civil cooperation. For that purpose, the Asian culture was basically promoted. Okay, and with that respect, right, the awareness related to, right, this Asian cultures and awareness related to, the mutual learning platform was also made by P. Sainath to the various peoples in that respect. Okay, next, the new kind of early humans was basically recently been discovered. It has been named as the Nesher Ramla Homo. So it's a new kind of early humans, or you can say that It's a new species, right, which have been recently been discovered in the Israel. So here the Israeli scientists have discovered a new kind of early humans, okay, which have basically studied, the some of the fossilized bones which have been recently been dug up in the cement plant in the central Israel. Okay, now the fragments or this fossilized bone, right, which is basically consisting of the skull and the lower jaw, right, with the teeth, is about 1,30,000 years old. You can understand that. And it is basically, forced the Israeli scientists to rethink, right, that some sort of a human family tree which could be even older than that. Okay, and the new kind of early humans could have been existed in the long back. So here that we talk about this Nesher Ramla Homo, right, which have been named after the place, which is basically the place at the southeast of the Tel Aviv, which is a city, right, where it has been found in the Israel, and where the Nesher Ramla Homo would have been lived alongside with our species, that is the Homo sapiens. So we belongs to the species called Homo sapiens, and this entirely new kind of early humans which are named as the Nesher Ramla Homo, which is basically named after the place where this new kind of early humans was basically found. So they would have lived alongside with the Homo sapiens for more than 1 lakh years, and many such findings have been recently been found. So early humans who had very large teeth, no chin, right, exactly no chin. So they have not found the chin or something like that, and may have also been the ancestors of the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals are also considered as, the one of the important part of the human family tree. Okay, and basically with that respect, they have the scientists basically of the Israeli, they have studied some of the challenging tasks of the studying of this new kind of early human, specifically in our evolutionary cousin, which was basically originated in the Israel to that respect. Okay, next, the China's dragon man. So recently the researchers or the scientists from the China have studied the ancient human skull that they have named that Herbian, cranium, right. So after studying this ancient human skull, right, so they have also linked this, the Herbium cranium, with a new human species which they call the dragon man or Homo longi, right. So this dragon man, which is basically the entirely the new human species, just like the previously Israeli scientists have been discovered because of the studying of the human skull. They have been derived from basically the Dragon River, which is found in the China's the Heilongjiang provinces, right, where this Harbin is located. So this cranium or this Harbin cranium that we are talking, okay, so this cranium could be 1,46,000 years old, right, that we are talking about a new kind of or the new species of, the human specifically because of its distinctive shape of the skull. Some of the scientists belongs to the China have suggested that it could be declared a new species of the genus Homo, right, and the size of the skull, which is, considerable, some sort of a brain capacity is some sort of a comparable with the modern humans as well as the Neanderthals. So to that respect, the dragon man could be a new species, right, and that might also, bridge the gap between our ancestors, which are also called the Homo erectus, and us, right. So in order to bridge the gap, so Homo erectus, then this new species called Homo longi, and then us, that is Homo sapiens, right. So that could basically, fill the gap between these basically ancestors of the humans to that respect. Okay, next you have the International Day of Tropics, right. Every year International Day of Tropics is celebrated on 29th June. So the United Nations basically observe the 29th June as an International Day of Tropics. Okay, now the most important aspect is that the tropics that we call is basically an area, right. For example, if I draw the earth, right, you will have the 0 degree, that is called equator, right. Then you have the 23.5 degree north, that is called to the north of equator we call the northern hemisphere. Okay, to the south of equator we call the southern hemisphere, right? And you have this 23.5 degree south. So this line we call the tropic of Cancer, This line of 23.5 degree south is called the Tropic of Capricorn, And this area that we are talking, the entire area is basically called the tropics. Entire area is called tropics because it is basically lying between the two broad tropics, that is the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. So this area that we are talking, right? So this tropics basically considered the 23.5 degree north to the 23.5 degree south. The entire area of the earth is basically considered as a tropics. So this International Day of Tropics basically celebrate the extraordinary diversity of the tropics because of the high concentration of heat and basically the humidity, which has ultimately led to the huge diversity of the tropics, specifically in the flora and the fauna. So this basically also highlight the unique challenges and the opportunities specifically to those nations which are found in the tropical zone. So it provides an opportunity also to take a stock of the progress across the tropics, right? To share some sort of a tropical stories and expertise, right? And the day is also commemorate to acknowledge the diversity and the potential of this region, right? If you consider the history, so here what happens is in 2014, specifically in the June 2014, the same day, the 29th June 2014, the 12 leading tropical research institutions basically met, right? And they have basically published a tropical report, or the state of the tropics report, right? And this report basically offered some sort of a unique perspective of increasing the importance of this region in terms of diversity, in terms of the other challenges and importance. Okay, so making this the anniversary of this report launch, which was launched by the 12 such leading tropical research institutions in the world. Okay, the United Nations General Assembly, or UNGA, adopted a resolution in 2016, right, specifically which declared, right, the 29th of June every year, right, as the International Day of Tropics to that respect. Okay, next, the National Statistical Day, or National Statistics Day, which is celebrated on 29th of June. So government of India has recently been celebrated the National Statistics Day on 29th of June, right, which is basically to recognize, right, the contribution which was made by the Professor P.C. Mahalanobis, right? So it is basically also falls on the birth anniversary of the Professor P.C. Mahalanobis, right? So this day is celebrated to create some sort of awareness among the youth, right, regarding the role of the statistics which is being provided in the socio-economic planning as well as the policy formulation in our country, right? So definitely the day is noted to popularize the use of statistics in our everyday life, right, and to sensitize the public as to how the basically the statistics help in shaping and framing the policies of the government of India. Okay, and this year, right, the theme of this year's the National Statistics Day is the End Hunger, Achieve Food Security and Improve Nutrition and Promote Sustainable Agriculture, which is also the Sustainable Development Goal, or Sustainable Development Goal number 2 of the United Nations, which is also a theme for that purpose. If you consider the history for the National Statistics Day, okay, so here the most important aspect is that the National Statistics Day is celebrated, right, since 2007. So first day was celebrated on 29th of June 2007, first time. So government of India basically decided to celebrate the outstanding contribution which was made by the late Professor P.C. Mahalanobis, or the Prashanta Chandra. The full name is Prashant Chandra Mahalanobis, right, specifically in the field of the economic planning and statistical development, right? And to mark the birth anniversary of this the great economist to that purpose. Okay, the Professor P.C. Mahalanobis was basically also known as the father of the Indian statistics because of its contribution which he had made. He was born ultimately on 29th of June 1893, right? He was a great scientist, and he also devised the measures, right, which compare the two data sets, right, which are also known as the Malinovis distance nowadays, right? And the Malinovis or PC Malinovis was also, member of Planning Commission in almost 6 years from 1956 to 1967, and right, and he was also the great contributor specifically in the second 5-year plan, okay, which is also known as the Nehru Malinovis model, right, which was also enforced through the second 5-year plan. And ultimately he has also credited with the foundation of the Indian Statistical Institute in December 1931. So he founded this Indian Statistical Institute in 1931, which is currently located as Kolkata. He was also awarded by Padam Vibhushan, okay, which was awarded by the government of India, which is also considered one of the highest civilian award to that respect. Okay, next, the relief package of around 6,28,993 crore was basically announced by the Union Finance and Corporate Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, which provides some sort of a relief to the people and the business persons which are affected because of the second wave of COVID-19. So around 17 measures which was basically announced by the Nirmala Sitharaman as the relief package, right, to the COVID affected 19, the people, which is basically to the tune of around 6.28 lakh crore. Okay, if you consider these 17 measures which have been grouped into the three broad categories. So first is the economic relief package from the pandemic, second the strengthening public health institutions, and the third is basically the impetus for the growth and development. For example, I'll give you a brief introduction about the economic relief package. For example, here 1.10 lakh crore, right, the loan guarantee scheme for the COVID affected sectors, right. So here the most important sectors will be covered as a loan guarantee scheme, right. A sum of around 1.5 lakh crore which is basically given for the emergency credit line guarantee scheme, which was recently implemented by the government of India. Okay, a new scheme was also launched, that is the credit guarantee scheme for microfinance institutions, that I have covered the 2-3 back in the current affairs papers, right, as well as the scheme for the tourist guides and the stakeholders. So here the scheme which was implemented under the economic relief package will cover around 10,000 regional labor tourist guides, right, which are recognized by the Ministry of Tourism, right, and which was also recognized by the state government. So here these tourist stakeholders will be recognized, and they will get also the loan up to 10 lakh each under this economic relief package for that purpose. Okay, then around free 1 month tourist visa will be provided to around 5 lakh tourists as a part of the economic relief package, right, and the facility will be applicable till the 31st March 2022, or till 5 lakh visas were issued to the first come first serve basis. Okay, and then this as a part of economic relief package also the extension of the Atmanirbhar Bharat Rozgar Yojana, which was also extended. Okay, so it was extended till 31st March 2022, right, as it was slated to be completed on the 30th June, but it has been extended to almost 1 year, right, as well as as a part of economic relief measure, the additional subsidy for, recently we have covered the DAP or diammonium phosphatic fertilizers, and P&K fertilizer was also announced as a part of economic relief package. So around the subsidy which has increased to around 42,000 crore was also as a part of the economic relief package, which was announced by the Nirmala Sitharaman, right. The free food also being given, right, as a part of economic relief package under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, right, which will be provided, right, to till November 2021. So here the estimated financial implication as a part of the Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Yojana will be around 94,000 crore rupees, right. So all such economic relief package would be provided. Okay, regarding the strengthening of the public health, here around 24,000 crore rupees will be provided in the financial year of 2021-22, right, for the purpose of the public health, right, infrastructure development, which is specifically emphasizing on the children pediatric care and pediatric beds for that purpose, right, specifically for the infrastructure development of the pediatric, the beds. And the second is impetus for the growth and development. For that purpose, a climate resilient special traits varieties was basically released, right, specifically with the revival of the Northeastern Regional Agricultural Marketing Corporation, right, so that the growth and employment specifically in the Northeastern region can be done, right. So it's most important that all such relief package would be announced by the Nirmala Sitharaman for that respect. Okay, next you have the Swedish PM, the Stefan Löfven, recently been resigned, right. So here the Prime Minister of the Sweden, right, Mr. Stefan Löfven was basically announced his resignation on the 28th June, right, 2021, right, as he lost the vote of no confidence in the parliament, right. Vote of no confidence is basically a procedural device in any parliament, right, which can be moved by an opposition party or opposition party members against the ruling party. So if the vote of no confidence is passed in the parliament, definitely the ruling party will completely resign from the government. That means once the vote of no confidence is passed in the parliament, the ruling party must resign. The government will completely fall. So 63-year-old the Löfven, or the Stefan Löfven, which is the first Swedish government leader or the first PM also to be defeated by the vote of no confidence. He was serving as a Swedish Prime Minister since 2014 onward. This confidence motion or this vote of no confidence was filed by the far right, the Sweden, Democrats, which is a party in the Sweden, right, after the left party, which said that is planning to have such motion itself to protest against the plan to erase some sort of a rent control which was imposed by the Prime Minister Stefan Löfven for that purpose. Okay, next the Pakistan to remain in the grey list. So here the Pakistan is noted for sheltering some of the noted the terrorists in the country, as well as for funding their organizations, specifically the money laundering and other procedure also been done in the Pakistan. So Pakistan has failed to take the appropriate actions against the UN designated terrorist, which was also accused in the 26/11 attacks on India, right, which is also Hafiz Saeed and the Jaish-e-Mohammed chief, the Masood Azhar, right. Hence the Financial Action Task Force have decided to keep Pakistan, right, in the grey list itself. Until now the Pakistan was also in the grey list. So here the Financial Action Task Force that we are talking is basically the global money laundering and the terrorist financing watchdog, which basically is basically an intergovernmental body to that respect, and is basically sets the international standards that aims to prevent some sort of illegal activities and harms by which such type of money laundering and the terrorist financing will be done to the society. So you can say that it's a policy making body. So here the Financial Action Task Force works to generate a political will across the world to bring about some sort of a national legislative and the regulatory reforms to that respect. Almost more than 200 countries basically have basically committed to implementing the mandate of Financial Action Task Force. And the Financial Action Task Force also developed some sort of recommendations or the standards, right, which ensure some sort of a coordinative global response to prevent the organized crime which is currently been going on in the Pakistan, like corruption, terrorism, right, the money laundering, right, the financing to the terrorist organizations, right, those bodies which is associated with the terrorism, right. So far, right, these authorities basically help in controlling of this money laundering, right, which is basically laundered for the purpose of some sort of a criminal activities, which is also related to the illegal drugs, the human trafficking, as well as the other organized crime which is basically occurred specifically under the guise of the money laundering to that respect. Okay, next the Rajasthan become the first state to start the state level genome sequencing lab. Okay, so here the facility for the genome sequencing have been started as the SMS Medical College in the Jaipur, which is the topmost medical college in the country, okay, for identifying the COVID variant, right? And with that starting of this, the state level genome sequencing lab, the Rajasthan have become the first state in the country to have this facility for complete genome sequencing at the state level. What is DNA sequencing, or what is this, the genome sequencing for that purpose? So the DNA sequencing or the genome sequencing is basically a laboratory technique which is used to determine the exact, sequence of bases, okay, which is basically found in a DNA molecule, right? If you see the DNA molecule, okay, so exactly you have to find out the sequence of these bases. These bases are basically, A, C, G and T, right, which is basically, considered as a part of the DNA molecule. So this DNA base sequence carries the some information, right, which a cell needs to assemble a protein, right, or the RNA molecule. So this DNA sequence information is important to the scientist, right, for the investigation of the functions of the genes, right? So this technology of DNA sequencing was made, far less expensive nowadays as a part of the human genome project which was implemented for that purpose. Okay, next, the thaw in India-China standoff. As you know that recently the India and the China have agreed to hold the next round of military talks, okay, to smoothen the process of the disengagement, specifically in the friction points in the eastern Ladakh, right? You have the standoff between the India and the China, right, and that was also prolonged along the LAC, that is the line of actual control. So this LAC demarcation, which is the most controversial part between India and the China, which separates the Indian control territory from the Chinese control territory. So this line of actual control, right, is basically around 3,488 kilometers long, right, and the China basically considered is only 2,000 kilometers long, and the remaining 1,488 kilometers are considered as a disputed, right? Here, this LAC is basically demarcated into the three sectors. If you consider them, the first is eastern sector, the eastern sector which spans from, Arunachal Pradesh to Sikkim. That is a part of the eastern sector LAC, right? The second is the middle sector. The middle sector basically runs in Uttarakhand and the Himachal Pradesh, okay. Then you have basically the western sector. The western sector is located as Ladakh. So the China is basically considered around 1,488 kilometers long LAC as a disputed. So here the disengagement process is one of the greatest achievement between the India and the China for the purpose of, the thawing of the relationship, or the thawing of this standoff between India and the China for that purpose. Okay. Then 1975 national emergency. As you know that the Indira Gandhi government has announced the 1975 national emergency based on the internal disturbances. Okay, this was the one of the three grounds which was given under Article 352. Article 352 of the Constitution says that a national emergency can be imposed on the three grounds, that is war, external aggression, and the third was basically the internal disturbances. That was the third ground when the Indira Gandhi government imposed the national emergency in 1975. But by 44th Constitutional Amendment Act 1978, the word internal disturbances was being replaced by the armed rebellion, because that emergency was misused by the Indira Gandhi at that point of the time. So now it is not possible to impose the emergency or national emergency based on the internal disturbances which was imposed in 1975. The third ground which was replaced, right, the internal disturbances as the armed rebellion. So right now you have the three grounds: war, external aggression and armed rebellion. That is the three grounds. Okay, so here the June 25th 2021 marks, the 46th anniversary of the emergency for that purpose. Okay, as you know that this emergency was effected from the June 25th 1975 to March 21st 1977. The first emergency which was imposed also by the Indira Gandhi government in 1971. Okay, that was based on the war when the India and Pakistan basically fought a war. Both of these emergency continued up to 1977 when two of these emergency was discontinued. It was highly debated, chapters in the history of Indian political system, right? Specifically, so as you know that specifically on the June 25th, 1975, okay, which was marked as the 46th anniversary, right? Here the most important aspect is that on that day, right, the president of India, on that day the president of India was basically the Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad, who was basically the president at that point of the time in 1975, on June 25, 1975, right, announced the state of emergency across the country, definitely on the recommendations of the Indira Gandhi led Congress government at the center. So this emergency was basically effected from the June 25th, 1975 to March 21st, 1977 to that respect. All right, so that's all for today. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this session. We will meet again tomorrow for our next current affairs. Thank you. Take care.